Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat podcast. My name is Kat, and I am your host, and I am so excited to welcome you back to another episode this week on the channel. If you're new here, welcome. Welcome to the Heal with Kat community, where we talk all about ancestral healing. We talk about family dynamics, human behavior within families, and then sometimes we venture out into the ethereal spiritual space that I love to explore so much. And if you are not new here and you're back for another week, thank you so much for supporting the podcast. It means so much to me to read your guys' reviews, the comments, the DMs that I get on Instagram, just the comments on TikTok, even of how much this content is resonating with you and how it's supportive for you in your life, which is exactly why I show up every single week. And I'm really excited to be back more regularly on the podcast because if you've been following along for a while, I took a little bit of a break upon the passing of my brother-in-law unexpectedly about a month ago, actually. Well, he's been gone almost a month, which is actually kind of crazy to think about. The last 6 weeks have passed by so quickly. I feel like I'm coming out of a cloud or like a blur. And although I'm not going to speak in detail on his accident and the grieving process because I'm still moving through it, I will say that every day gets better. I have ups and downs. I've really started to come to a place of more acceptance and really just leaning into now what I know to be true, what happens when you pass on the other side, and trying to lean into that more often than the shock of his passing and the grief. But every day it's up and down. So it kind of just depends on what day it is. But before this accident happened, I was really in a groove with my business, and I had launched 3 really incredible offerings that I'm just going to touch on very briefly right now before we jump into this week's episode because, like I said, things just fell off the wagon, of course. Had to be there for my family, be there for my sister, my nephew, and just put everything to the side. But as I slowly kind of lean back into normal life, I guess, I really want to talk more about these offerings that I have because they were so fun to create and they took so much work and effort. And I just think that they're super supportive tools that you can use on your healing journey at any time. And the first one is a cycle breaker quiz. It's free. The link is below in the show notes. It is completely free. The cycle breaker quiz is all about helping you understand your role in your nuclear family. And if you're viewing that role as parentified child, comedian, rebel, hyper independent, or caregiver as a black sheep, in a way of like separation from your family, I actually teach you for free in a free podcast episode that you get upon taking the quiz all about what archetype you are, how to shift from black sheep into cycle breaker and turn it into a power. I also tell you the strengths, the potential challenges. I go in depth with each archetype and I give you a spirit animal to work with as well. So if that's something that you feel like you want to understand more of yourself, what role do you play in your family? How is it playing out as part of maybe potentially an identity that you've created for yourself and you're ready to move out of it? Take the cycle breaker quiz. Like I said, it's free, it's fun, it's easy, and you get a ton of information. The other one is the age mapping mini course. I created that for $35, and the age mapping mini course is 3 days long. The first day is my very, very favorite tool that I've ever created in my business. It is the Ancestral subconscious meditation. And you guys, I literally love this meditation so much because you get to step out of the ego and step out of the conscious mind and step into the subconscious to reach your intuition, your higher self, your superconscious, and connect with your ancestral lineage and get information and messages and meet people that have crossed over, meet people that are still alive in their soul form. It is the most magical tool that you can use. And it's now living in the age mapping mini course. On day 2, I teach you how to age map. I take you through the exercise, which is quite short, but it's really profound in seeing how generational cycles or patterns or maybe even curses continue through each generation at certain ages. So it's a beautiful eye awakening experience to go through the age mapping practice itself. And then on the last day, I take you through Epigenetics 101. I keep it really simple and basic, but it helps you understand how generational patterns are not just energetic or emotional. There's also a biological component to why things get passed down. So if those two things sound really interesting to you, I'm going to link them in the show notes below. Give them a look and just see if it sparks a curiosity within you on your ancestral healing journey. And like I said, these are two tools that you can use at any point on your healing journey with your family. It doesn't always have to be ancestral, but again, you're here with a family constellation therapy facilitator, which my entire job is helping you see how unhealed trauma has created patterns of behavior, belief, or actions, or relationships, or whatever it is that is going through each generation. And you're carrying that pain and creating an identity around something that you can totally heal and heal for you and heal for your family. So the last thing that I launched is the ancestral chakra reading, but it's not a new launch. It's just a revamp of what I used to do. And I used to just deliver people readings on a PDF, like a document. Now it's live on Zoom, you and me, 35 minutes. I read through the chakras, any ancestral trauma, any mediumship, anyone that wants to come through, and we just talk through your struggles and try to give you some clarity on what's happening in your life at this moment and how there may be an ancestral tie to it. And it's not family constellation therapy. That's like the big thing that I offer. But these are small ways that you can start dipping your toe into the ancestral healing journey with me to understand how I utilize this work. And you can always bring anything that you find in each of these offerings to a family constellation therapy session. And that's where the big healing happens. So I'll just wrap it up there. I also want to say too that I just opened up a broadcast channel on my Instagram, which actually inspired today's episode. It's called Cat's Corner, cats with a K, corners with a K. My boyfriend made it up. I thought it was hilarious and super cute. So come join me on the channel because I drop in little insights of wisdom there, what my guides are saying, little energy updates, and just a bunch of random stuff. I'm actually leaving, or when you listen to this, I will actually be preparing to leave for Italy for a month to go spend time with family. And I know and can feel that, whenever you leave, you're like your base home and you leave, you kind of get that like inspiration. You connect to the world outside of you. You're not so much like in your cocoon. I can almost feel like the stuff that's ready to release, and all that stuff, the downloads and the energy updates and all the things that are coming through, they're going to go on Cat's Corner. I just feel like it's a safe, quiet place where I can just say what I want and how I feel. You guys can interact with it. You can ask questions, but it feels good to be there, and I'm happy with it right now. But as I said, this week's episode is inspired by a Q&A that I did on Cat's Corner on my broadcast channel, just asking you guys what you wanted to hear more about on the podcast, because I do have a whole list of things that I could talk about, but I want to tap into my community, see what you guys want to hear, what you need help with, what you need support with, and that's why I'm here. So this week, we're going to get into the topic of enabling our family members and what it means to teeter the line between compassion and acceptance and enabling. So that's what we're going to get into this week. The conversation that we're having today about enabling is really synchronistic, and I'll tell you why. When I opened up the Q&A on my broadcast channel, I got immediate response from one person that's a friend of mine, a podcast host, fellow podcast host, a wonderful human being. And she asked right away, can you do an episode on enabling family members, compassion and acceptance versus enabling? And I was like, great, I'm already getting responses. Like, that's a good feeling. And then 5 minutes after that, I walked into a group therapy session and the therapist says, welcome guys, today we're going to talk about enabling. And I was like, okay, so everyone's needing a refresher on this. And I just really love the topic because, and I'll get into this in the episode, but for somebody with a personality type like mine, I tend to lean on being an enabler in some ways. And it's not out of like malintent, it's out of a trauma response. And I'm going to talk about that today. So it was really nice to prepare for this week's episode because it was a refresher for me. And also, I was able to get some really good nuggets of information from this therapy group that I was in to support the episode this week. So let's start with the basics. Let's start talking about what is enabling. The act of enabling is doing something for someone that they can do themselves. And I want to say this again, most of the time, it's a trauma response. It's a learned behavior. It's maybe a coping mechanism or a survival mechanism, but it's something that we learned out of a painful situation. And what I love about the word trauma itself, that I learned from Dr. Gabor Mate, who is one of my favorite teachers on trauma, is that trauma is not actually the event that happens. Trauma is the response or the reaction to the event that occurs. And that's how we're able to look at enabling as being a trauma response. It's a response to a situation that happened. And so we don't always experience like one big thing, like trauma isn't always this one big thing that happens. It can be, absolutely can be. But sometimes trauma and our responses to these experiences are responses to little things that have happened over time. This is what they call CPTSD, complex PTSD. Some people like labels, some people don't. Sometimes labels help me understand things better, helps other people understand me better. When we're talking about trauma, we can't be black and white. Dr. Gabor Mate also says that being black and white is a childhood response to extreme emotions or extreme situations in where a child can't make sense of a situation. So it's either they hate me or they love me, I'm bad or I'm good. Could be for many different reasons from childhood. But actually being in the human experience is all about yes and. We're going to get into that today, but it's all about someone has a truth, I have a truth, and then there is the truth, and all these things can exist at the same time. It's a very human design reflector thing for me to say. It's like the one thing I know to be true about reflectors is that they're able to hold space for a lot of different truths to be true at the same time. And people could say, well, you contradict yourself. Well, actually, no, I'm just looking at all of the different parts. And I like looking at trauma in terms of parts because it allows for a dynamic relationship with all the different parts of who we are or the different parts of another situation. And it helps us to gain more clarity sometimes and also emotional maturity about situations. So that's the conversation I want you to start having with yourself around enabling is yes, and many things can be true. It's a trauma response. Let's find out why. So I'm guessing if you're listening to this, you may be questioning if you're an enabler, or you may be like, oh no, I'm totally an enabler. Let's look at the behaviors and the patterns that show up with enabling to help understand this a little bit more for the people that are maybe like, well, I don't really know. I need some examples. So these are not all the ways that enabling can show up for someone, but these are just the main ones that I know to be true. And the first one is covering up or excusing behaviors. And so when someone is covering up, or let's just say excusing harmful behaviors, they're minimizing the impact of it. And what that does is it's a protection mechanism that maybe what that person is doing is too painful to sit with, or it's too painful to watch, or it's too painful to feel, or maybe, there's a fawn response in the nervous system to like, oh, I guess, like I'm used to this behavior, right? Like remember, trauma response. I'm used to somebody treating me like this. I guess I'm just like not going to say anything because that's what I'm used to, right? So excusing the behaviors, covering them up, kind of poo-pooing their impact and minimizing the impact on you and the people around you and even on themselves. The second one is taking on responsibilities for others. If you're somebody that struggles with parentification or caretaking, and I'm going to raise my own hand with this one, this is the one I struggle with the most with enabling. It's doing things for other people, handling tasks for them, making decisions, helping finish their sentences, rescuing them from consequences, wanting to fix their mistakes, whatever that is, right? And I'm going to talk a lot about this one today, specifically because I'm going to keep bringing it back to examples with myself for real life tangibility. You may not resonate with them, you may. But this is a big one. Enabling, taking on their responsibilities, being the fixer, being the saver. Number 3 is avoiding the conflict. And you could say that this and excusing behaviors could be like one and the same, but I think where it differentiates is that if you're avoiding conflict as an enabler, you may know and see that the behavior is bad, but you may not know how to address the conflict or address the situation and the fear of the conflict that would happen. So you're downplaying everything to keep the peace, to feel like, everyone can be more comfortable, and you kind of just shut down in the situation. That's how it's similar to number 1. Is just avoiding the conflict of bringing it up and saying something. One of the things we're going to talk about today in the episode is if you see something, say something. Well, if you're avoiding the conflict and you're making excuses for people's behavior, then you are not saying something. You're just seeing it and letting it happen. And there's no shame. We're going to talk about all that. Number 4, providing resources for unhealthy behavior. So let's just say that you have a family member who's a drug addict and you give them money knowing that they very well may go and spend it on more drugs, but you feel guilty because you know that you love them and you don't want them to suffer, and maybe they're living on the streets. But it's almost like offering comfort without setting boundaries and avoiding the conversations that need to be had and allowing that person to avoid the change. So you're just feeding whatever you're enabling. You're enabling by feeding it, basically. The 5th one is taking blame. This one was really interesting when I was in the group and we were talking about this. Taking blame, accepting responsibility for their actions. I'm going to put this one and number 6 in the same category. I'm going to call it taking blame and codependency, because I think taking blame is a form of codependency. With taking blame, it's apologizing for or taking the blame for someone else's harmful behavior, and that allows them to skirt accountability for their behaviors. But also, when you're taking blame for somebody else, it's almost that you see you and that person in the same category. You're the same person. In family constellation therapy, we might call that deeply enmeshed or even identified at times. And so with codependency, when you're enabling and you're a codependent, you could include a lot of these, but really it's sacrificing your own needs and needing to be needed. Seeking validation through being needed from the other person. You stay relevant by being available for the person in your life that you are enabling. And there's fears with that too. Well, if I'm not there for them, what's going to happen? Again, just looking at how these behaviors and enabling, how they're resonating with you. The last one's overprotecting, shielding them from discomfort, micromanaging, their lives. At the end of the day, enabling prevents someone from taking accountability and responsibility for their own actions and their growth. And what I've learned about at least my journey with enabling, and you may resonate with this too, but I find this to be true for clients as well, is that when you are an enabler in any situation, you're perpetuating a potentially learned story that people are incapable. People are incapable. No matter how deep someone's trauma is, I'm telling you right now, people are not incapable. But people get really good at creating an identity around this, and they get really good at convincing others that that story is true. We enable someone when we buy into that story instead of living in the truth. And as an enabler, we need to be able to stand firm in truth. And maybe we can bring a little spirituality into the conversation here. Maybe we can start saying that if we know that we are souls in a human body and our souls are full of love and capability and courage and passion and heart and strength, and we are a piece of source living within us, and we know that that gets to live through us in this human body every single day, then does that support the belief that we have that people are incapable? Or are we struggling to believe that that is who we are as humans? Maybe that's not our truth. Enabling is really just our own relationship to being a fixer, a rescuer, or an avoidant, or our relationship with codependency. It just depends on how it shows up for you. I think that there is a magic, or let's just say an opportunity, in allowing ourselves to take a step back and let someone have their own experience in life, in allowing other people to make their own choices. And again, remember to challenge our own narrative that people are incapable and look for the reasons that people are capable. I think where it gets a little bit enmeshed and messy is that, again, people get really good at building an identity around being a victim. And I want you to go back and listen to episode number 55, Generational Curses, the Root Cause of Our Fears, and the Victim Mindset. I want you to go listen. I timestamp all of my episodes. Go listen to the victim mindset part of episode number 55, where I talk about what it means to be a victim and what it means to create an identity around it. I am not going to blame or shame anyone for feeling that they are a victim, because most likely they have been a victim of something. But if they create an identity around it and it starts to perpetuate their entire life, that's where things get complicated. So as an enabler, you have an opportunity to see the truth about someone or to continue making excuses. And I think when it comes to family, it can be very, very, very hard to make the separation of, I'm going to let that person have their own experience and I'm going to be in my own experience over here, and I'm not going to fix or rescue or save or ignore or avoid. Because if these languages of enabling were languages that you learned growing up in your family system, when you start to turn and shift and pivot away from them, it's going to feel like going against our deepest nature of who we are. And then if we go deeper with that and we have that self-awareness, especially if we're dealing with someone in our family, which is what we're really highlighting in today's episode, we're going to feel like we're going against the way we belong with our family. So if we feel that, if we avoid conflict or we are codependent or we're enmeshed, and that's the language of love in our family, and we start to shift that, it's going to feel wrong before it feels right. It is going to eat away at your heart in a sense, because you're going to want to do what you've always done, which is enable. And it's going to take a lot of self-control and accountability and self-responsibility to say, I'm not going to engage in this anymore. So coming back to that conversation we were having just a few minutes ago about things not being black and white in this conversation, or really black and white in a lot of different things that I talk about on the podcast and in my work. But today specifically, we're going to lean into what it means to live in the gray area of yes and. One of my favorite sentences in my work, yes and. Yes, your mom did everything that she could to take care of you, and she worked a lot and you felt neglected. Yes, my family member is doing something that makes them look incapable of handling their own life, and I can step away from this and not feed that story, and there could be a different way I can be involved in this. Yes, and. Because really what yes and does at the end of the day is it brings a more heart-centered approach to the way that we experience our family members, especially if you're enabling someone in abuse or addiction. And abuse is emotional, physical, sexual, it could be anything. So we have to get really curious when we're in these really messy family dynamics, because what I believe is when we take on the role of black sheep in the family, we push people away out of anger or hate or overprotection or hyper independence. It's kind of this like rude separation. I believe in my heart of hearts in this work that you can be a cycle breaker by simply standing in your sovereignty, knowing your boundaries, knowing who you are, and knowing what kind of relationships you want to have with the people around you, and being at peace, knowing that there may be people that you need to keep at a larger distance and people that you can bring closer, and doing it with an understanding and a compassion and a love for yourself that is not rooted in low vibrational bullshit, to be honest. That's like the most honest way I'm going to say it. Where my trauma response rubs up against enabling is that I have to look at my relationship to my childhood, to parentification, and to caretaking. Growing up, I was deeply parentified, and in that, being the oldest daughter, I felt a need to step in and protect and soothe and take care of and pick up the slack and show up. And so as an adult now, I'm really working on my parentification right now and my caretaking. It's kind of reached this point where it's like do or die. Like if you don't deal with this now, it's like this is the best energetic time to deal with it in my life. If I continue it, it's going to basically chokehold my relationships, my nervous system, my life, my freedom. So I have to ask myself, as an enabler who is parentified and the caretaker and the people pleaser, where am I continuing to keep myself in that role that's not mine to be in anymore? Am I still a 10-year-old girl who sees so much emotional toxicity around me and needs to protect and save everyone? No. Honestly, no. But my trauma, my complex PTSD is hardwired to look for reasons to protect and look for reasons to caretake and look for reasons to put everybody else before me. And so I have to stay accountable and say, how have I created my own identity around this? Because it could be a really good opportunity for me to do some work on it. And here I am. I never thought I would say this again, but I am back in traditional talk therapy with a wonderful therapist, and I'm doing this work. Because if you know me, you know that it's like I've been in and out of talk therapy since I was 5 years old. Okay. So like, I think like, I feel like I ran the, like the road had finished for me with traditional talk therapy. And here I am, 33 and back in it. And this is what you do when you see an opportunity to move forward. My relationship to enabling currently is popping up in a few different places in my life. And it's all looking the same. And it's all my biggest block. And it all showed up in the last 3 months of my life. Like almost like spirit was like, oh, we've been kind of hinting at this for a while, and you were really distracted with some other things, and that's fine. But the Jenga blocks, they're gonna fall, and someone's got to be there to pick up the pieces. So let's stay on schedule here, and like let's figure this out. And I'm like, okay, I don't really want to, but okay. I feel like if you were asked a lot as a child to be the emotional holder, caretaker, or even the physical caretaker for an adult in your life, you know, this leads to parentification and feeling overly powerful and feeling responsible for other people's lives. And I'll never forget when my old therapist used to tell me, this was like 7 years ago, Kat, you aren't that powerful. And the first thing I said as a kid, I was born like an old soul. Those things that I would say and being put on this pedestal as a child made for me to feel that I could fix people. and I could solve people's problems, or that I was responsible for their well-being and I was somebody that people needed to lean on. I needed to save people. I needed to fix people. I needed to be that as a child inappropriately emotionally enmeshed with people. That's what my belonging was. And I was proved each and every time that I was leaned on that I was a good girl. So as an adult in the healing space, this is really one of my greatest skills, is to be able to hold space for people, to channel information, to see the bigger picture. I'm basically taking the better parts of that childhood experience into my purpose now. But outside of my role as Kat, the FCT facilitator, or Kat, the podcast host, or Kat, the reader, the intuitive, the healer, I can get myself into some weird dynamics with people because my entire identity has been built on this idea. And so as an enabler, I think that we have to be able to take that crown, that hero complex off, and just trust that people can figure their shit out for themselves. The therapist in that group therapy that I went to said that we have to be able to trust that other people's lows build character, resiliency, growth, self-trust, all the things that we need these people to do for themselves. So the biggest question I have to ask myself as an enabler is, what is the story that I am creating in my head around the need to enable this person? And what do I believe about this person that simply isn't true? I want you to really, really think about that, okay? You can even pause it here, grab a journal and a pen. Think about these two questions. What is the story I am creating in my head around the need to enable this person? And what do I believe about this person that simply isn't true? One of the other big questions that I had to ask myself, specifically around my relationship to enabling and being a rescuer, a fixer, and a saver, is what fears do I have that if I were to let go of the need to rescue or fix or save others before they had the ability to do it for themselves, what is that fear? And I'll tell you what mine is. My fear is that if I don't save my family member, they're going to go down a horrible path that I can't save them from, and they could die. It sounds crazy, but that's what goes through my head. And so my brain starts saying that I need to be responsible for taking away all of the chaos and the pain that this person is holding and save them before they make a mistake and go down a horrible path and die from it. Like, worst case scenario. But do you see how this exposes in a very loving and gentle way through fear what my trauma response is? My relationship to being an enabler and my fear also is my relationship to abandonment and neglect. If somebody were to come to me and ask me, why are you enabling? Why do you continue to enable this person? I would literally say to you, because I don't want that person to feel the way that I felt when I was in pain. And I wish that somebody would have done for me what I'm doing for them. There's so much innocence in that response, right? What do you hear? Because what I hear is somebody that needed more support emotionally, needed more physical validation, emotional validation, more support, needed people to show up for them, needed someone to talk them through their feelings. I had needs that were unmet, and now I'm projecting them onto somebody who doesn't need an enabler. They don't need an enabler. And I think it's okay to be aware of your fears, and it's okay to be aware of your part in your enabling. But at the end of the day, your self-regulation, your choices, your responses to others, they are your responsibility. I want to validate that I understand that it is very hard to watch a family member suffer. I don't want to watch the people that I love suffer. It is very difficult for me, but it is not my journey to enmesh myself in. At some point, as the enabler, we have to be willing to do what we need to do to set a boundary. And the boundary not only protects us, but it protects the person we're enabling. I want you to think about a time in your life where you were on your own dealing with a really challenging situation. And no matter who you called or who you reached out to, no one had the soothing, no one had the answers. It was just you, this problem in your hands, and you were just holding it. And it went on long enough that finally, through your own tenacity and your own strength and your own determination, you worked through it. And at the end of working through it, did you ever give yourself a moment after to truly feel how accomplished you felt and how incredible it is to be able to work through something for yourself? Like, I can think of when I first started doing FCT and I was going through some really challenging times and I wanted to give up. I wanted to give up in multiple ways, on my life, on my family, on myself, on my friends. I had lost my spark for life. And it was through family constellation therapy that reminded me that life is worth living and it's such a gift. And I was able to work through those difficult moments that now I know that if somebody would have stepped in and done the work for me, it sure would have been nice. It would have been easier, but it would not have been worth it. I would not feel as empowered as I do now. It would not have become my whole life. And then when I have challenges that come up again around family dynamics and my role and feeling separate and not feeling like I belong and feeling different or whatever, I know how to better manage those and navigate the situation because I built something for myself within myself to get through a challenging situation. It wasn't addiction. It wasn't abuse. Those things need more professional support. But in the day-to-day stuff of how I was enabling myself in my life, who cares? Give up. No one cares about you. But whatever I was doing for myself, I had to fight through that shit and come out on the other side. And now I can help others do that as well. Because I've built these tools in my toolbox that now I know, hey, when I see this happening with somebody else, these are the kinds of conversations we need to have. This is how I can bring loving awareness to this person. And this is the way that I feel comfortable in supporting this person. Your boundary is your sovereign weapon or protection. Weapon, I don't like the word. I don't even like the word protection. Your boundary is your magic as an enabler. Your boundary says, I respect me and I also respect you. When we enable, we say, I don't really know if I respect you. Don't really know if I respect me. And since I feel the separation between us, I'm going to come and fix it, save it. Or I'm going to avoid it and pretend like it doesn't matter. Because if I don't bring it up, then at least we'll still have this weird relationship, right? So it's just, no matter how you boil it down, it's about looking at the way that we belong with other people and the ways that we either avoid or confront or fix or save in order to stay in a certain kind of dynamic with someone else in the family. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, I recently went to a group therapy session and the therapist was talking all about enabling. And she said, when you're enabling somebody, there is as much information in what people are not doing than the information you get from what people are doing. And this doesn't have to be just for addiction. This can be for anything. There is as much information in what people are not doing than the information you get from what people are doing. So if we see someone who is struggling and we know that we cannot fix them or save them, and we know that we also can't avoid the situation, there's a better way to show up for your loved one, for your family member. And something you could do could be something like, hey, I really want to talk to you. I've noticed you've been a bit off lately and you haven't really been in your routine. And I've noticed that like things are a bit off emotionally. And I really care about you and I really haven't even heard from you. I just want to check in and see how you're doing. The best way that we can be supportive for our family members that we find ourselves enabling is to change the dynamic, just shift the dynamic a little bit and support them by just bringing awareness to them. If you see something, say something, right? Got that from the group therapist. If you see something, say something. But your boundary in that situation is to stop at the fixing part. Or, it's hard if you're the avoider, right? If you're the avoider, you're going to want to avoid it and, be like, this isn't my fucking problem. I don't want to deal with this. Fine. That boundary in some way is helpful. But if you're somebody like me who is the fixer, the savior, wanting to be, the person that's needed to fix everything and doesn't want to see people, make mistakes, your boundary is stopping at the fixing part. Your boundary can be, I don't need to keep cleaning up the messes that other people make because it's not my job. That's not my role. This is why I say it's really important to understand what your role is in your family system. Go take my cycle breaker quiz. I didn't create it for nothing. I created it for you. You get to see what is the role that you are holding in your family system. I've narrowed it down to 5 different kinds. And I will teach you, once you get your results, I email you a free private podcast episode that tells you a longer description of the role, your strengths, potential challenges, how to grow from it, turn into being a cycle breaker, like all the things. I teach you with these just small baby steps, how to shift the dynamic. Because the more that you keep yourself moving in this cycle and you don't stop, the more you're just enabling the situation. The hard part about showing up in a supportive way with boundaries with our family members is that sometimes when we ask them, I'm noticing that something's off. What do you need? Maybe they don't know what they need. Maybe they're still figuring it out. Maybe they are like, actually, I want you to help me fix it because you're in this certain dynamic and they've become reliant on you. And you can be the person to stop that cycle and put your foot down and say in a loving way, hey, you know what? I can't fix the situation for you. This sounds like something that you've got to work through for yourself. But I will be here to support you. I'll be a listening ear for you if you need a hug or you just want someone to talk to. But it sounds like you need a meeting. Or, hey, when's your next therapy appointment? Maybe they've got some tools that they can share with you. I don't know that I feel fully equipped to help you with this. Or do you need a hug? Or that sounds really hard. And I'm really glad that you shared that with me. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how you get some support with that and work through that. In order to stop the pattern of enabling, you have to take yourself out of the pattern, out of the cycle. No more caretaking, no more fixing, no more rescuing, no more saving. And if this shows up for you, no more avoiding. Because at the end of the day, you are perpetuating the cycle of someone believing, I am not capable. And the truth is, your family member is capable. They just haven't been able to get down to the nitty-gritty part of themselves. They haven't met themselves in that darkness to find the light again. And if we are always willing to step in and do it for them and not say anything about it, what kind of service is that to the ones that we love? Is that really love? Or is love really that passive? Or does love say, hey, I see something. I'm seeing you. I'm saying something. And I'm going to support you getting the help that you need without inserting myself into the situation as your therapist or whatever role that you're taking on that you can put down. The thing is that people that we love, and including ourselves, people need accountability. But we can do that for them in a loving, kind way by just bringing awareness. So, in terms of looking at patterns of enabling within a family system, what we know is that patterns are repeating for a number of reasons, but one of the biggest ones that we know is learned behavior or adaptive behavior, meaning that while a certain behavior might not be in our truth, right, in alignment with us and what we truly believe, we will learn this behavior to adapt and belong to our family system. And I want to stress this so poignantly, because this is one of the bases of FCT or family constellation therapy. Belonging is our intrinsic tribalistic nature. You can sit here all day long and tell me till you're blue in the face, I don't really care about belonging in my family. I will not believe a single word that you tell me. That's my job as a facilitator, is to look at the truth. The truth is that we are communal beings who crave belonging, connection, and love. People need to be in community. They need to belong. They need to feel that they have a sense of connection to something. We lived thousands of years in communal ways, guys, and only in the last 250 years have we started embracing more individualism. And my theory is that in the last 100 years, especially after the last 2 world wars, we have taken individualism way too far. Like, there are way too many hyper independent people on this planet, but our trauma says, it hands us hyper individualism on a silver platter and says, this is okay now. Because we have so much trauma that we have not dealt with. And I have this like crazy intuitive feeling that like the world wars blanketed our planet with a vibration that we are still trying to escape from and heal from today. Another podcast on that at another time. I have so many thoughts to say about that, but I will spare you all for another episode. But in order to understand how the pattern of enabling started, we must first look through the portal of us. How are we enabling? How are we embodying the pattern of enabling? Then we can look at our nuclear family, who we come from. Okay, how did enabling show up in our nuclear family? Or was there addiction or abuse or anything else that happened in the family system that we learned to enable? Like, how did this show up in our family? And then through the nuclear family, we can use that as the portal to draw it back into generations of what we know about. But first, we start with us. If somebody came to me in a session and said, I'm an enabler and I really struggle and I don't really know where it comes from and I want to understand it better and I want to heal it for my family and for myself, my intuition goes straight to like who was separated, who was abandoned, who was neglected. And then also abuse. And I'm talking emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, because with abuse comes a suffocation of voice. It comes, when we're abused in any way, we give up our boundaries. We just throw them to the wind. We can't, when we are being abused, boundaries, they don't happen. And our boundaries are not honored emotionally, physically, spiritually. And so we will give up parts of ourself in abuse in order to keep people close or whatever it is. And one of the things that I was taught in my family constellation therapy training, it's this very, very deep but subtle thought that we have to leave room for, because many times enablers find themselves in situations that are harmful with other people. And at the core, what I would look at is, well, you must really love that person. Well, no, because they remind me of my abusive dad. I don't really know why I'm staying. FCT would say, on some level, you love them. And you have an attachment to them. And you have an attachment to that kind of personality type. And we have to look at where there is a void of real love and also where your loyalty to that kind of behavior or pattern or person is coming from a place of love. Because FCT really looks at how are we loyal to things that don't align with us out of love. Okay, I'll speak for myself. People pleasing is a generational, on both sides of my family, a female generational pattern. People please, codependent, do what you think you're supposed to do, be a good girl. Like it is ingrained in me, okay? When my therapist starts asking me, what would it feel like to not be a good girl? I'm like, I don't know who she is. I don't know who she is. I literally do not know who she is. That is the way I get love. I haven't been able to really dive into what it would look like if I wasn't always a good girl. Because what it does to my body, I'll tell you. I'll take you through it right now. I have a loyalty to my family by staying a good girl, even if it's not good for me. What it feels like in my body is literally here, and my head feels like a pressure cooker. My shoulders are going up. My body, I feel like I'm going to leave my body. I'm like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. And then I start analyzing and my brain just starts spinning. Well, what if I go and do this and then I get in trouble and it's because I wasn't a good girl? Or what if I did this and it's because I wasn't That's what starts. So I don't know why I went on a tangent about that. I feel like that was just relevant in the moment. But when we enable, sometimes we think we're being loving by enabling. And we're not. We're staying in an unhealthy pattern to stay loyal to something or someone or a behavior of some kind because that's what we learned what love was. If everybody else is staying quiet, we should stay quiet too. We shouldn't say anything. Actually, you should fucking say something. That's the point. This is why I love family constellation therapy, because you can trace back and meet certain people in the family system on these papers in this field and meet them in their experience and understand why and how it got passed down to you. If you have no clue what I'm talking about and you're new here, there's 2 podcast episodes I want you to go listen to, aside from episode number 55 that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to link them below. Episode number 52 is What is Family Constellation Therapy? You can go learn all about what FCT is. And then episode number 58 is a live one-on-one actual session with one of my clients who offered to do a session about the mother wound with me to share with other people because she loves this work so much. Go listen to those episodes and you'll understand what I'm talking about, what the benefit of family constellation therapy is. Let's go back to enabling. The boundary that we have to have with our family members in this ancestral pattern of enabling is asking ourselves where we allow ourselves to take a support role and believe that that family member is responsible for themselves. So my question for you, if we're going to start shifting, making these very small shifts from enabler to support or witness, I'm going to get into that in a second, is how do you want to show up and support while also taking care of your well-being? I'll give an example for me. I want to support my loved ones that I'm enabling by being a listening ear, by encouraging them, and by holding space for their feelings. And I'm going to take care of my well-being by not inserting myself in the situation, by not trying to fix it for them, or be a mom. Like I have this thing where I try to mother everybody and it's annoying. Even for me, it's annoying and I'm like still doing it. Maybe I'm also supportive by recommending a good book or a good podcast. Hey, I don't know if you'll like this. I don't know if it's supportive, but I thought you might like this. Leave it alone after that. Don't do anything. Just let it be. And also another question is, how do you want to remind yourself that that family member's life is their life and you don't have to save the day? I don't know yet. Maybe one way that I can do it personally is by putting myself in their shoes and being like, you know what? When I went through my really difficult thing, Sure, I would have loved someone to save me, but man, look how much better it turned out that I saved myself. And that process was painful, but it was magical. And I'm going to allow them to go through that because I want to see them meet themselves on the other side. I want them to have the experience that I had, whatever it is. Find your way. Doesn't have to be this like profound thing. It just can be, well, I know my experience was great. I'm going to give them the same courtesy of experiencing that they're freaking awesome too. And believe that your family member is freaking awesome and they're capable. But there's something that I want to talk about that I love to talk about. I love talking about this word. I will not shut up about talking about this word. And this word is compassion, because I think this world needs compassion so freaking much these days. And the original question that I got on my broadcast channel was enabling family members and the difference between being compassionate versus enabling them. I love this question so much. Here's my response to that specifically. If you're someone who is deeply compassionate and you like being compassionate, I think being compassionate is a phenomenal quality to have. But your compassion tends to lean on the spectrum of being a little passive. Maybe you make excuses for people, you let things slide, you kind of just like, yeah, whatever. I can totally put myself in their shoes. They must have a lot of trauma. I'm just going to kind of like let it go. That's a little too far on the spectrum of compassion, where it becomes a little bit, like I said, passive to allowing, almost where like the boundaries don't exist and everyone just like floating around. I want to introduce you to the idea of being a compassionate witness. This is one of the greatest tools that you can have in your toolbox if you're in the healing space, if you're a therapist, if you are in a place where people lean on you a lot, if you're a parent, a sibling, like in any situation where there's a relational dynamic of some kind. Being a compassionate witness is one of my favorite things to embody, because what it means to be a compassionate witness, not a compassionate fixer, not a compassionate hero, not a compassionate savior, but a compassionate witness. It means to be fully present with someone as they share their experience or their emotions or their pain, and you meet them in that feeling, in those feelings, without judgment, without trying to fix, without trying to minimize what they're going through. And it involves it offering like a safe place where somebody can say, man, my brother was really supportive of me when I was going through a hard time because he just listened to me with no judgment. And I felt heard and I felt seen and I felt validated. And he didn't try to fix it for me. And, my ego wished that they did, but he didn't. And I got through it and I'm going to be okay. And I learned a lot along the way. But that compassionate witness piece, it holds empathy and understanding and offers support simply by being there. Like, we forget in our world today that is so driven by technology and quickness and efficiency and fast-paced environment that we need to compassionately hold space for recognizing people's humanity and their struggle and allowing them to express themselves freely. This is why I have a problem with AI, because my fear is that one day AI is just going to run the whole world, and the part of us that is our expression of our soul is going to be ripped away from us and put into the hands of this technology, when there is a beautiful sovereignty and a power in being an emotional human being. To take compassionate witnessing a step further, it's also about allowing people to live their life freely as they wish to. Just got goosebumps. Being a compassionate witness says, I see your feelings. I see how this is weighing on you. I'm going to hold loving space for you, and I'm going to allow you to live your life freely as you wish to. And in this role, you acknowledge their experience with kindness and genuine care, but you refrain from inserting your own emotions or opinions or solutions unless asked for. And even then, tread lightly. Speak from experience. This is what I do. Maybe you wouldn't do it this way. Maybe when I share what I've been through and how I did it, you'll realize what you don't want to do. You can't have an ego with this. To step out of the enabler, you have to relinquish control. And it can be really hard to be a compassionate witness for someone that we love, who we want to protect from harm. Like, especially if you are a parent and you are enabling a child, my heart goes out to you. If you're somebody who's a faux parent like me, someone who steps in as a parent, it is actually a sibling or a friend or a cousin or whatever, you know, you have the advantage of being like, well, this is not really my problem at the end of the day. But as a parent, you're kind of like, oh shit, I might have to take some accountability here. And also, I can't fix this for them. So what you as the enabler are actually doing when you take on a role that's not yours is that you're consciously on some level agreeing to continue the dysfunction. Because I want you to be honest with yourself. Deep down, you know it is not your place. It's not. But you carry this pain in your heart to watch someone you love suffer. So you play along. You don't want to break the bond that you have, or you don't want to cause conflict, or whatever reason it is, be it desire for control or fear of abandonment or whatever. So being an enabler and stepping out of that role and into the compassionate witness and into the brother, sister, family member role, whatever your role is, you really are leaning into acceptance of the other person. So have you ever asked yourself, do I really accept that person? Do you actually support what they're doing? Because if you don't, then your acceptance is actually more like compliance, unfortunately. I had to learn that the hard way. True acceptance of other people and being that compassionate witness happens when we are not attached to someone else's experience, rather witnessing. Acceptance literally says, it is what it is. It doesn't mean that you don't feel an emotional spark from it or an emotional pain or response. But taking a step back from enabling is about accepting people for who they are, trusting that they are capable, and giving them the freedom and the grace to move through this in their own way. And it's going to be uncomfortable and it will be challenging, but rewiring old patterns, it gives you freedom and it gives the other person freedom. I've said this a million times today. We have to allow people room to make mistakes and learn through their own experiences. That's the only way. With things like abuse and addiction, I just want to make it very clear. Certain situations may not require you to be as passive. It's your choice how involved you want to be in a dangerous situation. There are plenty of resources, hotlines, books, tools, therapy programs, addiction specialists that you can reach out to if something is really dire and you need that support. Please go and get it. But in most cases, this is how we can approach enabling. The beauty and the hard part of stepping out of the enabling for us and for the person that we've been enabling is that change happens in small baby steps. So we're going to have a lot of patience for ourselves and patience for the other person, allowing them to be human, make mistakes, fuck up, get back on the wagon, whatever it is. And some days we're going to be good at it. And some days we're going to suck at it. Some days we're going to have the power to not support things. And some days we're going to skirt the rules. And that's just the process of life. Ebbs and flows, ups and downs, and you just learn to accept it. The last thing I want to touch on for the enabler listening is something deep, something confronting, but a truth that I had to face in group therapy when I started writing this episode. And a question that I really had to be honest with myself about. The therapist asked, what are you getting out of being an enabler? Okay, so that's like when I wanted to get up and leave. Me? I don't want to take accountability. I'm just trying to help. Not always the case. Unfortunately, we're human and parts of us look out for ourselves and parts of us are self-centered, and that doesn't make you a narcissist and that doesn't make you selfish. Of course, on a spectrum, sometimes it could, but being an enabler, if you really trust that you have a good heart with what you're doing and you really do care, it's only natural that like you are going to be getting something out of it. And we have to look at what that is. Because while being an enabler is a trauma response that we have been conditioned to keep everybody happy and other people are incapable, we're also selfishly getting something out of this dynamic too. And for someone like me, who's a parentified caretaker, who's a good girl, maybe I feel like a good girl when I enable people. Maybe I feel needed. Maybe I feel like, oh no, I'm still close with this person. Like this is how we're finding connection right now, and I really value connection. It's important to be aware of what you're gaining from this dynamic. And be honest with yourself. I touched on this a little bit earlier in the episode, but I have been asked before, why are you enabling? Like what are you getting out of it? And my response genuinely is, well, I'm doing for others what someone didn't do for me. And there's absolute truth in that, 100%. If somebody came to me and said that, I would believe it. Because I do believe that at the end of the day, we love our family no matter how difficult they are, no matter how difficult the dynamic is. We do want the best for them. I never doubt when somebody says, I'm doing for someone what I wish someone did for me, or I really care about them and I want to help them. But do you notice what the focus is on? Me. I'm bringing this full circle to what we talked about earlier in the episode about learned behaviors and wounds that we try to mend with others. Why are you offering this kind of support or enabling this person? I know that you love them, but what else? The thing is when you hear your own response after you ask yourself that question, I want you to remember something very clearly. That response is human. It is so fucking human. I can't even tell you HUMAN, human. Hello, human response. But it is not a healthy one. Because the way that I look at it is if I am secure within myself and I know my role in this family system and I'm acting from a place of responsibility, self-awareness, sovereignty, I know that my family member can do whatever they want with their lives. And with me, they will have love, but they will also have truth. And truth is far more impactful than enabling. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term it is. But when I make their issues about me, it feels a need that I have. Maybe it feeds my parentification. Maybe it feeds my identity around being a caretaker. But I'm not that 10-year-old girl anymore. And that 10-year-old girl who was parentified, it didn't help me. So it does not help me now, and it does not help my family member. Maybe in the short term, not in the long term. So we don't have to shame or punish ourselves for, how we try to fill our empty holes or our wounds, but we do have to be honest with ourselves that if we truly do not want to participate in this pattern or this cycle of enabling, we have to be willing to see our part and step out of it. Someone's going to have to step out of the cycle. And we can't ask them to do it because then that would just be asking someone of something that they may not be capable or ready to do or even see a need to do. But if we are starting to recognize that there's a misalignment with that behavior, the enabling, what they're doing, whatever it is, only we can be in control of how we take ourselves out of it. And we certainly can't ask ourselves to do that in a day or a week or in a month. We're going to need consistent support, therapy, maybe FCT for the ancestral ties that we have to it, awareness, experience, and practice. Practice makes progress. So like I mentioned before, it may feel wrong or uncomfortable in the beginning because it is a huge part of your identity. And it may trigger your anxiousness to want to hold on to that person even more in the beginning, right? Like, remember how I told you, if I were to let go of that like good girl mentality and stop enabling, what does it feel like? Oh my God, I can feel it. I can feel like this is all on fire, right? The last thing I'll touch on is something that the therapist said in the group therapy that I've heard before in coaching actually, but it re-sparked this belief. And she said that we need to be giving from our own overflow. in life. If our cups are empty or below the top of the cup, how can we give to others in a way that is real and authentic and truthful? If we give ourselves what we need and fill our own cups and meet our own needs, then we can give from the overflow that we've created, and everyone benefits, and we don't suffer at the expense of others because we're not giving parts of ourselves away. So what I love that she said is what I've touched on a little bit in the episode: redirect, just pivot a little bit. Oh gosh, I'm noticing I really want to enable that person right now. And this is how I know that I enable, because I've thought about it. I've made notes. I'm conscious. I'm aware of it. Oh gosh, I noticed that this feeling in my body, I really want to enable them. Pause. What's good for me is to take a compassionate, supportive witness role. Okay, I'm going to step back a little bit. Maybe you physically remove yourself from the room for a moment. Maybe you have to take some time away from that person. It's just about redirecting and pivoting, catching yourself in the moment, and then asking yourself, is this coming from a wound, or can I be more of a supportive witness? And challenging your belief. People are not incapable or worthless or helpless. And the people that we're enabling, they need to believe that for themselves too. Okay, how are we feeling? Woo. I'm feeling like we just did a little somatic processing there, right? Just gotta have to get that moving. That energy was really moving through this week's episode, and it's a sensitive topic because we love the people that we enable. Of course we do, especially we're talking about family. We love our family members, but if we love them, we gotta let them live too. We gotta let them be accountable for their choices, and that takes time. Okay. I'm literally right there with you. I am not speaking on a pedestal or a high horse. I'm learning this right now, right freaking now. It's hard. Okay. I'm right there with you. I want to know how this week's episode landed for you. So please don't forget to DM me on Instagram or let me know in the comments below. Remember, also, you can rate, subscribe, and review the podcast and this episode specifically. And when you screenshot and send that to me, just Instagram DM me the proof that you've done that. And I enter your name to win a free family constellation therapy session with me. I announce it on the last day of every month. I Instagram story and announce the person that wins. So if something in this episode is really resonating with you and you feel like you want to experience more freedom or liberation, or you go and listen to those other episodes that I recommended, come find me on social media and let's connect. So with that, I will see you next week on the Heal with Kat podcast. Thank you so much for joining, and yeah, I'll see you next week.